Something that I've been thinking about a lot recently and have also seen come up in discussions online is the question of whether the One D&D playtest is being rushed, specifically to meet the timeline of the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons in 2024. Though I think this question will be very difficult to answer until we see the final product, I do have some thoughts about the topic, and I'm also quite interested to hear what you all think about it as well. But if I had to guess, I'd say there's probably enough time. The team made it very clear back at D&D Celebration in 2021 that they were targeting the next evolution of the game to coincide with its 50th anniversary in 2024. This set a fairly tight timeline for them, particularly as we would not see any future details until nearly 9 months later in August of 2022 when the One D&D announcement came out and we received the first Unearthed Arcana playtest packet. However, now that we are starting to get a bit of a better look and understanding of what One D&D is going to look like, many are questioning if there's still enough time given the self-imposed deadline pressure. When the One D&D playtest first started, we were told that we will be receiving a new Unearthed Arcana playtest packet roughly once a month. It didn't take long for this promise to come into question, as only the second UA took nearly a month and a half to release by the end of September, and then receiving no UAs in October or November, with the third coming out in early December, and the fourth finally releasing in February of this year. With the process seemingly slipping into an every 2-month cadence, it was finally confirmed by Jeremy Crawford that this was to be the new goal, with him confirming that the next UA should be releasing sometime in April. What's worth mentioning at this point is that when he confirmed that the new release cadence would be every 2 months, Jeremy also stated that each UA would be bigger than the previous ones. This is an interesting approach, and it will be fascinating to see just how much bigger or how much more information we will get with each new release. So then, with this context established, the logical question then becomes, is there still enough time for the team to release a well-designed, balanced, and fun game given the time constraints? And I think the answer really depends on a number of factors. Firstly, when exactly is the 2024 Player's Handbook set to release? They have stated 2024 multiple times, but when? That's a pretty big window. If I had to hazard a guess, I would probably say sometime in the third or fourth quarter of the year. The 2014 Player's Handbook was released in August of the same year, so I think August or September is a fair assumption. We know that Wizards of the Coast has no real qualms about releasing a bulk of books toward the end of the year, like we saw in 2021 with the release of The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos, all being released in September, October, and November respectively. Therefore, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could see the same happen with the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and Dungeon Master's Guide. Following on from that then, is there enough time between now and, let's say, September of next year to test everything that needs to be tested? My guess is probably. With the release cadence being pushed to bi-monthly, that leaves a maximum of 9 more UAs before the new books are released. Now, there are a few caveats here. 9 more UAs assumes a new release exactly every 2 months, nothing more, nothing less. Realistically though, I don't actually think that this is going to happen, but probably not in the way that you might expect. I don't think it's likely that we will see any releases slip much beyond that 2-month threshold, though it is certainly possible. What I do think is more likely is that we might see an increase in release pace, particularly as the books get closer and closer to release. But I'll touch on that a little bit later. Right now, and for at least the next 2 UAs, we are still receiving some major foundational core changes to the game, the base classes. We know that in April we will see the release of the Warrior group, which will include weapon updates, and the Mage group likely following in June. That will round out the remainder of the classes for the game, but will still leave a bunch of subclasses and various other aspects of the game, including spells, feats, subclasses, class revisits, and more yet untested. With all that said, please bear in mind that the bulk of this next section is pure speculation and based on the limited information that we have. I think it's important to remind ourselves at this stage what the purpose behind the playtest period is. While it is giving us the opportunity to help shape the future of Dungeons & Dragons by giving us some degree of influence over the general direction that certain changes will head, at the end of the day, it is the design team's final decision on what happens in an effort to thread the needle for what they feel the player base at large wants. It's impossible for them to completely satisfy everyone. The game would be an absolute mess if they did that. So then, in a lot of ways, this playtest is as much about marketing as it is about tapping into the community's feelings and thoughts. So let's take a look at what's left to do with the time remaining. As I mentioned, there's up to 9 more UAs, assuming the release cadence of once every 2 months is maintained. Now, in reality, this also isn't that accurate. This would put the 9th UA release in August, and if I am speculating that the 2024 Player's Handbook will be released in August or September, this is obviously not enough time to send up for testing, gather feedback, and process the information in any meaningful way. The team will need some amount of lead time to finalize the text, layout, and the physical design of the books before sending them out for printing and mass production. We know that they can move fairly quickly, as evidenced by their turnaround time on the Mages of Strixhaven UA, which was released in mid-June of 2021, with the survey opening in July, and the book being released in November. That is honestly not a long time. Obviously, one relatively small book does not have the same stakes as a new player's handbook, but I'm trying to be both optimistic and realistic at the same time, and use this as some evidence for their track record. It's also important to note just how dramatically different the options presented in the Mages of Strixhaven UA were from the versions that we saw in publication. So then, if we say they need 5 to 6 months prior to release, that leaves 7 UAs at a bi-monthly release cadence. April, we will see the warrior group with the weapon changes. June, we'll probably see the mage group with what I have to imagine will be a lot of spell updates and surely additional rules and feat updates as well. This will then leave 5 more large, full-size playtests for the remaining 36 subclasses, any class revisions, and other aspects that have yet to be covered or still need revisiting. It sounds unlikely, but I really think that it can be done without radically jeopardizing the quality of the final output. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we can expect to see at least 6 subclasses per UA. Remember, with the expert group, we receive 3 full classes and 3 subclasses. Considering that subclasses tend to be smaller, the expert group UA contained considerably more content. Additionally, the subclasses are largely informed by their main class counterpart. Once the team has settled on a design that works for the base class, and it receives some reasonable satisfaction scores from the community, many of those same design decisions can be transposed onto the subclass. While I am sure that we will see some, I would not be surprised if we don't see many revisits to subclasses during this playtest period. Outside of those major elements being the classes and the subclasses, we're then left with weapons, magic items, spells, feats, and some other general rules changes. These will be mixed in throughout the course of the remaining UAs as the team sees fit. Something I touched on earlier is the possibility of an increased release pace as the release draws nearer. I can certainly see a world where in the early part of 2024, once most of the overall major changes for the game have been largely finalized, they could revert back to the monthly cadence to garner quicker feedback on rules, items, feats, etc. Generally speaking, though not always, these types of changes don't take as long to solicit feedback from, iterate on, and course correct should that be required. This is why I can see this world where we see the more frequent releases towards the end of this process to ensure that all the important aspects of the game have had time to be tested. When all is said and done, I do truly believe that there is enough time remaining to test all of the aspects of the game that the team feels are necessary to garner public feedback on. Remember, there will be things that we won't see, such as just about everything that is going to end up in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. This is why I think it's important to keep in mind that while we may only see 1 or 2 versions of something done during this playtest period, the team undoubtedly has numerous other iterations in their back pocket, ready to go depending on the type of feedback a certain change receives. These changes may or may not receive any public playtesting, but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily a bad thing. We are trusting them with the majority of the rest of the game, and to present the designs that we are testing in the first place, so it's not unthinkable, as the final release draws nearer, the team will have a very good sense of what the community is looking for in the next version of Dungeons & Dragons. Let me know what you think though, I'm really curious to hear some of your thoughts and takes. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing as it dramatically helps other people find my content, and be sure to check out some of my other videos, they're all linked on screen right now. But otherwise, take care.